All right, so good evening, or at least in our case, good evening, but depending on where you might be joining us, it might be morning or afternoon or the middle of the night, but welcome anyway to the College Essay Writing Tips virtual event here at Hamilton. We're really glad to have you here with us. And I am JD Ross, Associate Dean of Admission at Hamilton, and joining me today are...
Hi, everyone. I'm Niki Barron. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Hamilton, also a Hamilton College alum. I graduated from Hamilton in 2002. And I'll pass it over to Eric.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Erick Gredonia. I'm one of the Assistant Deans of Admission here at Hamilton College, and I'm so excited to be talking to you all tonight. Welcome.
And we've got one more person joining us who is not on camera and who won't see today, but that is Caitlin Oliver, Associate Dean of Admission. And she is hanging out in the chat for us. Caitlin will be fielding some of your questions that you may have during the event, so feel free to ask a question in the Q&A or the chat section, and Caitlin will address it there. And in some cases, depending on the question, she may forward it to us to answer live too. So thank you, Caitlin, for joining us this evening and handling the chat for us. Much, much appreciated. So again, welcome to everyone. We're very excited to have you here and ready to think about your college essay writing experience. Now, I took a peek at the registration beforehand. I think most of you here are seniors, starting your senior year here in high school. So maybe you've already begun thinking about your essay. Maybe there's an outline or even a first draft that's been done already. If so, that's terrific. If not, don't worry. You've got plenty of time still. For those of you who are juniors, it's great to be early. Great to know that you're thinking already about this important part of your college application. So our goal here tonight, Eric and Niki and I, our goal is for us to be able to offer some advice, some tips, answer some common questions that we all get as admission officers about the college essay. But understand that our advice tonight really is just that. It's our advice. It's coming from our three shared experiences at admission and from our perspectives here and our role in Hamilton's admission process. We're not, can't really speak to what other schools are doing or the approaches that they take, of course. Niki, Eric, and I are sharing our advice and our tips with you. And really, there are no hard and fast right and wrong ways to approach the essay process. But we think there are some guidelines, some tips, some things that you can keep in mind at all stages of the process as you're going through this, from conceptualizing to what you're going to say, to actually planning out, writing, reviewing your work. But we know, right, all of you out there, you've got a great essay in you. We read them. We spend a lot of time reading them. Starting in a few months here, we enjoy that part of the job and getting to know more about our applicants through the stories that they choose to share with us. A little bit of some housekeeping and a roadmap for tonight. We're going to start by talking about the essay, how it fits into your overall application, what we're looking for in an essay. Then we're going to talk about choosing some potential essay topics, some tips for how you might make that essay stand out, for how it can be memorable for those of us on the other end of the process here who have the opportunity to read it. We're going to give you some examples of memorable essays, some things that have stuck with us and that we feel have been particularly well done. And then we'll give you some tips, some things to do, some things and not to do maybe when it comes to writing your essay. We'll talk a little bit about supplemental essays and prompts that are often part of the application process. And we're going to save some time at the end for a few questions. Again, our colleague Caitlin, she's in the chat. Do feel free to engage with her there. She's also going to elevate, again, some of your questions here to me and Niki and Eric as well. So let's jump right into things here. Our first topic, how does the college essay fit into the overall application and how do we use it? So when we talk about the essay, we're obviously talking about that main personal essay statement that you're writing as part of your application. If you use the Common App, the Common Application, the Coalition Application, now through SCORE, or the QuestBridge application, right? There's a main personal essay field there that contains a number of possible prompts, depending on the application that you choose, right? Some ideas for you to consider. And you'll notice that for the most part in these prompts, they're pretty open-ended. They give you a fair amount of flexibility in what your response is going to be to them, how you're going to come at it. And you're going to be able to choose among them and select one that gives you the ability to talk about something that is important to you, some way, some avenue for you to share your experiences. They're open-ended because we want to see where you're going to go with them, what direction you're going to take with your response. Think about that essay as your story, right? Your direct line to the admission committee, those of us like me and Nikki and Eric, the folks who are reading your essay. Highlight what makes you, you, and what has shaped you as an individual. And really, when you think about it, that essay, that essay part of your overall application is one of the few portions of the app where we hear directly from you, the applicant, right? We look at your transcripts, we review them, we look over your test scores if you choose to submit them. We get to read recommendations from a counselor and a teacher or two. But this is really the one area where we get to hear your voice, read your story, and see what's important to you. Now, you should also know that as part of this application process, once you, and for those of you who really are just getting started, maybe you haven't been into the Common App or the Coalition app or the QuestionBridge app real deep yet, but once you get in there, you're going to see that in that app, in addition to the essay prompt area and field, there's a place there for you to provide us with additional information around your application that you think we should be aware of during the process. We're going to get into a little bit more detail about what should be included in your essay, but keep in mind if there are extenuating circumstances or issues that you think we should be aware of, there's a place called additional information in those applications where you can let us know about something that you think we need to be aware of. But that's not something that you necessarily have to worry about finding a way to kind of shoehorn or fit into your overall essay. And I say that really because, as you know, COVID has likely had some sort of an impact on your academic trajectory, your high school journey, right? And your college, your high school counselors, they have been pretty good about passing along important information to us that we should know regarding that. But you'll have a section in the app for telling us about any challenges you've had there as well that are pandemic related. I think it's also important to mention that if you have any information that you'd like the admission committee at a particular college or university, right, Hamilton or wherever else you might choose to apply, to know about you, and specifically about your relationship with that college or university, you should feel free to send that specific information to the college directly by email, right? Either to the admission officer that you have been working with or that you might see as represents your particular area, or to the general college or university email address. Do keep in mind that the essay that you are writing in the Common App or the Coalition app or the QuestBridge application, that's a shared essay, right? It's shared with all of the institutions that you apply to. So any college specific information that you would like us to know about should be sent outside of that essay and sent separately to Hamilton or to any college or university that you apply to. And finally, wrapping up here before we get started, know that your essay is just one piece of an overall application, right? An important one, of course, but really one piece. We can never make a decision on your application just based on one part, but rather we're looking at how all of the different aspects, all the different pieces and parts come together and present you overall as a candidate for admission. And this is very much a human process, right? There's 3 humans here with you on the screen today. There's just counting Caitlin, there's 4 in the chat, right? And along with our other colleagues in the office, what are there, about 10 of us, I think, right? We all take great pleasure in reading your essays. It's one of my most favorite parts of the job is getting to know about my applicants in my territories and getting to know about their experiences. Several of us will be reading your application, getting to know you through your essay and learning about your story. All right, I'm going to ask my colleague Niki now to talk about some of the things that we're looking for in your college essay.
Sure. Thanks, JD. So what are we looking for in an essay? We are really trying to get a sense of who the student is as an individual. In fact, that's really what we're trying to do as we review an entire application, is that we want to know who you are, we want to know your story, we want to know your experiences, and we want to know your perspectives that you could then contribute to our campus community. And so your essay is one place where you get to share your story, where you get to share your voice, where we get to hear directly from you as the student who is applying to our campus community. It's really a chance for you to bring your application to life, because this is one of the few places in your application when we're actually hearing directly from you. So we're reviewing your transcript, we're reviewing letters of recommendation, but those pieces of your application aren't your voice. And so your essay is a chance for us to hear directly from you as the applicant, for us to hear a little bit more about your story and who you are and how you might contribute to our campus community. It is your voice. It shouldn't be somebody else's voice. So for example, we know that all of you applying as first-year students to Hamilton College are likely teenagers. And we know what teenager voices sound like. And so if we review an essay that doesn't sound like it was written by a 17 or an 18-year-old, we're going to wonder exactly who the author of that essay is. It is a good idea to share your work, share your essay, share drafts of your essay as you're working on it with adults, with people who know you. Get some feedback from them that you can then incorporate as you continue to revise your essay. But in that process, don't lose your voice. So make sure that your essay is still authentic to who you are as a student and the things that are important to you. The essay is also an opportunity for us to hear a little bit more about, or to learn a little bit more about your writing style. Hamilton, for example, focuses really strongly on communication across our curriculum. Writing is a big part of the classroom experience here at Hamilton. And so your essay is a writing sample. It's a chance for us to hear or get a sense of what your sense of grammar is like, your vocabulary, making sure that it's the appropriate length, staying within that word count, that word limit of that essay is also important. So yes, grammar and punctuation and spelling and the length of your essay is important, but so is tone and voice of your essay and how you choose to represent yourself as you are telling your story through your essay to the college admission committee. But Eric, I'd love to pass it over to you now so you can share with our audience maybe some ideas or tips that you might have as students are starting to think about writing their essay and how they might begin as they are thinking about potential topics to write about.
Totally. Thank you, Nikki. So usually when I meet with prospective students who are starting their personal essays, I get that question, how do I pick a topic? There's so much to write about, but sometimes it's easy to get lost in all of the experiences, your backgrounds, the stories that you could tell within 650 words, right? So how do you pick a topic? And I think a theme that I've heard from both JD and Nikki is that, the personal essay is sometimes our favorite part of the application because of that personal voice, because that we get to hear from you exactly the things you're interested in or some of the things you've been through in your life. And so we get really excited thinking about that personal statement or that personal essay. And I want to emphasize the word personal, right? This is an opportunity for you to talk about something that is super important to you. But I also want to remind all of you that, this should also be appropriate, right? I think in reading numbers of essays over and over again, sometimes we forget that these are strangers, right? And as strangers in a professional environment, we're excited to get to know you, but we also want to make sure that it is professional. And so oversharing is a thing. I do want to reiterate that. And so just remember, as you're picking a topic, picking one that is personal to you, but that is also appropriate to share with strangers like JD, like myself, like Nikki, when reading your essay. I also know that, sometimes students are thinking about writing about things that are unique to them, right? Unique experiences, unique accounts or situations that have happened in their lives. And so this is a great opportunity to do that. This is your chance to tell us something that you may not get to talk about anywhere else in your application. Like Nikki was saying, we're going to read your letters of rec from your counselors and your teachers, and they might offer great insight into the things that you've been able to experience in the last 4 years of your high school experience. But this is a really great opportunity for you to talk about something that maybe isn't represented in all of the other ways that you're engaging with us at Hamilton College as an admissions committee. I also know that, the hardest time to pick a topic is when you sit down to write the essay, right? I'm thinking back to that SpongeBob episode where he's writing down an essay and he's only working on the letter T for a good minute. And that is something that students go through, right? It's really difficult sometimes to sit down and write an essay. And so I love to give the advice or the tip that, it's really easy nowadays with your smartphone or a notepad in your hand to just write down a list of funny, poignant, powerful things that are happening in your life, moments that you've experienced in the last 2, 3, 4 years, and start now, right? I think that's something maybe after this webinar that you start doing, just gathering some ideas on how to approach writing an essay and picking a topic. I know that sometimes it's easy to spark those ideas after writing them down, and I've met numbers of students who've gone from one idea and have continued to hone in on what that they can talk about when picking a topic in their essay. I also know that a lot of students wanted general advice on how to become a better writer. And so as an office, we love to encourage, students becoming better readers, right? When you read great literature, whether that's inside the classroom, outside the classroom, it's really easy to pick up on some great writing styles or language that you've come across that inspire you to write in a similar style. And so we encourage students to continue writing, to continue reading. We all know great writing when we see it. And so if you're picking up an old favorite that you love to read during your summers, or if you're getting excited about the new book that your English teacher is assigning this semester, these are things that are also going to inspire you when approaching a topic and writing your essays. There's a number of resources on our website, including a section of essays that work that we've seen in the past. And so we encourage all of you to check out our essays that work for some examples of some really cool topics and how students approach their essays. There are no perfect topics. There are no bad topics, right? Singularly bad topics, but it's the approach that we get excited about. It's the approach and the time that you take when picking a topic. I know when I'm thinking of various examples of topics, I'm thinking of, numbers of essays that I've read where they've talked about adversity in their lives, right? And you can write about this if it's important to you and your story. But remember, you do only have 650 words. And so these topics, always need the context, and we want to see growth and transition. So that's another piece of advice. If you're going to talk about adversity in your personal essay, make sure to provide that context so that we can follow you in that story and in that personal account. I also know a number of students who are writing about their favorite activity, their favorite hobbies, their interests. And I know those are essays that we get excited about. Again, showing something that's unique to you, personal to you, maybe tells us how you're going to contribute to the overall Hamily on our campus, right? And I also know that students get excited about writing about changes in their lives, right? Whether they're moving in the middle of their high school experiences or, shifting, different things that they're a part of during their childhood, right? It's really exciting to hear about various topics, and there's a number that you can pursue. So we encourage you to think about that as early as you can to really get good at the things that you do want to talk about. JD, do you want to talk to us about some of the elements in an essay that we get excited about, but that we also want our students to be aware about?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've had some experience reading a number of essays every year, like the three of us have had, it can be kind of easy to see when something feels not quite right or forced a little bit. And I think often this can be the result of a student who is maybe trying to work in a gimmick or a device or something that they think is really going to enhance their essay or make it stand out. And it can indeed do that, but sometimes for the wrong reasons. At the end of the day, we want you using your voice. We want your authenticity to shine through in your writing. Resist that temptation to try and hook us in with a gimmick or maybe write in a humorous style because you think that's something that is going to capture our attention better, right? Now, if you feel you've got a good sense of humor and you think that it helps show you who you are, right? But by all means, use that to your advantage. Let that part of you of your personality shine through, but it should feel natural and not like you're forced. Your college essay, really not the first place you should take a crack at humorous writing. If it's not something that you are adept at doing, that the college essay really not the place to practice. So if that's not you, don't feel the need to use that humor. But right, humor aside, just one element, sincerity is really important in your writing. So is clear and concise language. Use the language and words that you're comfortable with using. We can tell if something feels unnatural or out of place. It's pretty easy once we get into the pace of reading someone's essay to feel this feels like it comes from the heart. It really flows. We know where this person is going, and we can tell if something is jarring or out of place. An effective element that I always enjoy it when I come across it in an essay is, and something that I can think really helps make them engaging is the use of a twist, or like a plot twist device, right? Perhaps you're leading the reader one way through your essay, and I think it's going in a particular direction, and boom, I've got a twist, I've got a turn to the experience. It really gives me something to think about and makes it exciting to read. Another good way of grabbing the reader the right way is to really nail that opening, right? That have a good, strong opening sentence, maybe not even opening paragraph, but good, strong opening sentence that draws us in and makes us want to read more and see where you're headed. In a minute here, Niki and Erick are going to talk a little bit about that, but it's important to remember that this is not like your traditional paper that you're writing for an English class. There's no thesis statement, there's no evidentiary paragraphs that follow. It is really a description of an experience, an interest, a relationship, a goal, something that reflects who you are and shows your voice to the reader. But when you're doing this, when you're describing this experience or this interest, sometimes with some writers, there's a tendency to want to like give us everything, right? Throw everything in there in the kitchen sink. You want to explain your entire childhood before you get to the point of your life where something that transformational happened. And like Erick said, there's only 650 words. You've only got so long, so there's so much space. So focus is really key here. It's better to try and hone in to talk about one moment or a couple of interconnected moments in time, rather than to illustrate this, rather than trying to bring us up to speed on your entire childhood and your upbringing to give us the context of the backstory. It does not. You just don't have the runway in your essay to do that. If you avoid that, it'll allow you to really concentrate on that one area, that one element, that one experience, but it'll also give you the room and the space to give us some depth in explaining why this is so important. Let me turn it back to Niki and Erick now to talk about opening sentences, right, and grabbing the reader. I believe they both have an example here to share with us.
Sure. So as Erick mentioned a little while ago, we do have sample essays on our website in the section called Essays That Worked. And so you'll actually get to read full essays from some of our applicants that stood out to us over the years. But we've pulled out a couple of sentences that Erick and I will share with you that stood out to us as being attention-grabbing opening sentences. So one example is, I'm going to read the sentence to you, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why this sentence stood out to us. But the sentence reads for the student's opening for her essay: "When I was still small enough to fit in the sun-drenched space between the armoire and the couch, I sat cross-legged and spun the world." So this is a great example of a great opening sentence because there's so much depth in this sentence that makes us so excited to keep on reading it, to keep on reading the essay and to see what point in time is the student about to describe to us, that the student was young enough or small enough to be able to fit in what I would imagine would be a really tight space in the student's part of the house. The fact that the student spun the world, what does that mean? Where is this essay headed? And so this is a great example of a great opening sentence because there's so much vivid descriptive language just in this one sentence that makes me really excited to keep reading and to learn a little bit more about the insight that the student is about to reveal in her essay. Erick, do you have an example of an opening sentence too?
Yeah, I think, one example that I love to pull up, the topic sentence reads, "It's 6:52 a.m. on a frosted over Friday in September, and my dad and I are running late as we wind down our steep hill to school." So similar to Niki's example, right? That rich, descriptive, specific language, right? Naming 6:52 a.m., Frosted Over Friday, September, right? Setting the stage almost. It kind of reads like the beginning of a children's story. And I think as a topic sentence, as an opening sentence, it's grabbing my attention. And then it's also getting me excited about where this story is going to go, right? What's happening at 6:53 a.m., right? Is the author or the student going to go into detail on what exactly is happening on that Frosted Over Friday in September? So just being really specific, being really vivid in those descriptions, I think not only leaves us as a reader with further questions, but also gets excited to encounter or come across even more descriptive language. So that's a topic sentence I get excited about.
Thank you both for sharing those. Those were some great intros, right? They grabbed our attention. They hooked us into the essay. But now you've got us in there. Let's talk a little bit about topics. And the three of us have some examples of overall essay topics and directions that have proven particularly memorable for us over the years. I think we're each going to share one of those, and Niki will talk a little bit then about some overused topics as well. But let's start with some things that are still memorable. So this was an essay that was, oh gosh, maybe 2 or 3 years, but probably 3 years ago now, and it was written by a student. She was the only girl in a family full of boys, and it was a very athletic family. And she started her essay out by reflecting on how she was always the one who had to be the goalie for her brother's street hockey team, right? They set up the street hockey goals in the road in front of their house, and they were like one person short, so they needed a goalie. And so they would take her, she was probably like 5 years old at the time, and she described how they would take the cushions off of the sofa, and they would take bungee cords and duct tape, and they would wrap the bungee cord around the couch cushions to her legs and to her stomach, and they'd stick her in the goal so she could stop the puck coming down the road. It was just, that's how she started the essay, right? You know, my brother pulled the cushions off the couch, and the other one held me down while they wrapped the bungee cord around, right? But all to keep me safe so I could sit there and be their goalie, right? And I'm like, wow, let me learn a little bit more about, you know, the family that she's coming from, and the environment that these older brothers created for her, and you know, how that has kind of shaped her journey into being a student athlete in high school. And it was just a really vivid description, and it was, you know, I got a little chuckle out of it, and I could really kind of envision that this poor kid being, you know, having the pillows taped to her and being put out there. But you know, in the end, it was a really warm story and a really great read. Eric, I think you've got one that I think involves chickens, right?
Yeah, so it was this past year, we had a student who spent his essay talking about raising chickens during the global pandemic, right? I think one of the elements to the essay that really stuck out to me was the opening sentence, right? He starts with the cliche that's something like, you know, people say home is where the heart is, but for me, home is where the hens are, right? And I think immediately I was excited about this essay and to see where the student was going to go. He ended up talking about the essay as a reflection of the pandemic, right? It wasn't about COVID per se, but it was about how raising these chickens gave him a sense of tranquility while also sparking intellectual curiosity. And I think that was clear not only in the writing, right? The diction that he was using, the choice of words that he used, not only, you know, talking about, you know, seeing his chickens on a Tuesday morning, but then, you know, including the names of his chickens, right? I think he has a chicken named Buttercup and Red Wheelbarrow. And it was a memorable essay. And going back to that point, this is an opportunity for you to talk about something that we won't see in any other parts of your application. And this student did just that, right? If it wasn't for this essay, I would have never known that he has 26 chickens that he loves so much, and that have helped him so much during the pandemic. So it was the details that were so colorful. It was the lifelike or picturesque accounts of him and his chickens, and the lessons that he's learned in this past year, not only through the adversity, but through the community that he's formed with his pets. So that's an essay that I'm going to remember forever. And then Niki, what about you?
Sure. So one of my favorite essays over the years has been a student who wrote about her commute to school. She commutes to school by walking. And her essay was very descriptive and vivid about how she commutes to school and walks to school each day and walks home. So this essay provided me with a great description of her community. She described her walk to school as she walks through her neighborhood between her home and her school. She also talked about what she thinks about as she's preparing for her day at school. She gets geared up to spend a day with her peers and with her classmates and all that lies ahead of her in her day. But then her essay talked about her return home from school by walking back home and how she thinks about and processes and digests everything that happened to her during her school day as she's then getting ready for her evening ahead of doing homework and other extracurricular activities. And this essay stood out to me because it gave me such a sense of who the student is. It gave me a sense of her community because of the description that she provided in her essay. It gave me a description and a sense of how she thinks, how she processes information, and how she prepares for anything that lies ahead of her. Taking it a little further, I could then envision the process she would go through as she's preparing for her time in college. And so the essay was just very insightful. It was very self-reflective, and I felt like I really got a great sense about who she is. I also think that this is a great example of an essay that stood out to me over the years, because as all of you who are here today who have signed in are thinking about your essay, I think sometimes, as Eric mentioned, it's hard to think about that topic. It's hard to think about what to write about. But I think sometimes the most ordinary, mundane topics can sometimes actually be the essays that stand out to us the most. Because when students are able to really put themselves into their essays in describing these ordinary topics, many of you are probably commuting to school every day, for those of you who are no longer doing remote school during the pandemic. But many of you are either walking or taking public transportation or driving or somehow getting to school. It's something that everybody does as they are getting ready for their day. It's an ordinary topic, but it was very insightful in how the students spun it. And so this actually leads really well into the list of essay topics that we read regularly. So there are some common topics that we will often see from students. These aren't topics that are things that we are encouraging you to avoid, but just so that you are aware that we read essays along these similar topic lines so that you're able to think about an original spin that you might take in these essays. What is a different perspective that you might be able to provide the admission committee if you're going to choose to write about any of these topics? So these common topics that we will often read essays regarding throughout an application cycle are about a student's activities. So these are essays that you might write about regarding community service experiences that you've had, or athletic games or competitions that you've had during your time in high school, or maybe some performances that you've been involved in. Activities are a really common topic that we will read essays from. But again, it's thinking about who are you in this experience, and how can you provide the original spin or provide us with an original take on this commonly used topic in your essay. Another example of a common topic is when a student will write about how different objects or items in a particular location represent who the student is and all the different experiences that a student has had. So for example, a student might write about all the pictures on the student's bulletin board, or all the magnets on a refrigerator, or all the different pairs of shoes that might be in your closet. These are all really interesting things that we're interested to hear about: your pictures, your magnets, and your shoes. But because you are often then listing the experiences that each of these objects provide, it's not providing as much depth as we might get if you were to write about just one of those magnets, that what one of those magnets might represent for one experience. So again, it's thinking about an original take on this common topic. Another common topic is students who write about writing the essay. So we will often read essays where students write about how they were unable to come up with a topic, and so they're just going to write about the experience that they've had writing their essay. Again, it's thinking about what personal insight that you can provide about that experience of writing your college application essay. I think sometimes students are surprised that we actually do read several of those essays every year. And then another common topic are when students are writing about relationships that they've had with influential people in their life. where they will spend a lot of time in their essay describing that other person. So maybe it's an uncle that's really important to you, or maybe it's your grandmother who's really important to you, or your best friend who's really important to you. And the essay is describing more who the uncle, grandparent, and cousin, best friend, sibling is, rather than giving us a sense of who you are. Again, it's not something that you need to avoid doing, but just make sure that if you're going to talk about this meaningful relationship, that you're really relating it back to you and who you are. So I think hopefully this will give you a couple of ideas as you're possibly thinking about these topics. And again, it's fine to write about these topics, but make sure that it's insight about who you are and that you're being self-reflective so that we get a sense of your voice and who you are in your story.
Great. So I think we are now going to share a few lists of do's and don'ts when it comes to your college essay. And Nikki, I believe you've got a slide for us.
Yes, there you go. Hopefully you all can
Perfect.
see the screen. And we'll
Yes,
start the slideshow.
there we go. First of all, on the do side, write about your interests. And the keyword here, your interest, right? We're going to be able to tell pretty quickly how invested you are in something by the way you write about it. We want to know about something that piques your interest, raises your passions, right? And gets you it is part of your life. Make sure it's about you, not about somebody else.
One thing we also don't want students to do is to try to be what you think we want, right? I think that, we appreciate authenticity. We want students to be genuine in their personal essay. And so we don't want you to try to put on this charade or this facade of what you think the Hamilton Admissions Committee wants to hear. We want to hear your personal story, your unique voice, something that we've talked about a lot tonight, but just another way to reiterate that this is not an opportunity for you to be something that you think we want to see. We want to see exactly who you are through this personal essay.
Do be appropriate and remember your audience. Remember that you are writing to strangers who don't know you, who want to know you. And so please be appropriate for your audience of an admission committee, that we are adults in a professional setting, and just be appropriate in your language, be appropriate with your tone, your voice, your story, and just remember who your audience is.
All right, don't let your essay become over edited to the point where you're going to lose your voice in the process. Now, right, review and editing, obviously a really important part of the essay writing experience. You're not just going to want to write this and hit submit, right? You're going to want to take time to look it over, to think it over, to share it perhaps, and get some feedback, but don't get to the point where this process is stripping the essay of what makes it about you, right? So that your voice is disappearing from the over editing. Too many times I think students are more concerned about perfection through the process, and a lot of times that will cause you to lose your voice.
Do tell a story, right? This is a personal essay, or this is an essay that is unlike maybe some of the essays you're currently writing in your high schools, right? Where you're arguing or, or writing a thesis statement, like JD said earlier, where then you're providing evidence and trying to make an argument through that essay, right? This is more of an opportunity for you to tell a story, to tell a personal account of your experiences, of your background, of the things that you get excited about, of the things that you want us as an admissions committee to know, when we're reading your application, there are essential questions that we think about when going over students' application. And so, telling a story is going to be the best way to really decipher which students are excited about applying to Hamilton, but also excited about contributing in meaningful ways to a college campus.
So don't forget that this is a personal essay. This is very closely related to what Eric was just talking about. So this is not an essay that you're writing for a class. It doesn't have an academic focus to it, but again, make sure that it's personal, related to you, that it's self-reflective, that it provides us with your story and a lot of personal insight about who you are as a person.
Do try and show us rather than telling us, right? Through the language that you choose to use to describe yourself or your event or your topic. Think about to a few minutes ago when we were sharing with you some of those captivating opening sentences, or Eric and the essay about the chickens, right? It just really descriptive narrative there, or me and the student who was the goalie with the pillows taped to her. We were really showing the experience and allowing us to be involved in that vibrant description.
Don't overuse a thesaurus or be too vague. I think this is one of my favorite don'ts, because I think it's easy when writing an essay that you're submitting to college admissions officers that you want to have, fluffy language because you think that it'll make you sound smarter, or it'll impress the admissions committee that much more. But I think more often than not, we find students who are using this language and then not getting to the point, right? They're not able to really get specific about what their story is, what the point of their personal statement is. And so don't overuse a thesaurus. Again, we want to hear your voice. We want to be able to read a student, most likely a teenager's perspective on a specific account. And so be specific in that language, be detailed. Those are some things that we get really excited about when going and reading essays over and over again.
Do relate your essay to who you are now. So sometimes students are writing about things that might have happened a long time ago in the past. Remember that you are applying to college right now, for those of you who are rising seniors in the year ahead. And so we want to make sure that we understand who you are as a person right now. And so if you are going to take the topic of something that might have happened 10 years ago, please remember to relate it back to how this experience shaped you as an individual, and spend more time in your essay describing how this experience shaped you and who you are now, and therefore what kind of individual and what kind of contribution you'd be able to make to our campus community in the following year when you arrive.
Don't be afraid to start over. Right. And you've got time now. You're here. It's August. You're starting the process early. That's great. Because if you get through an essay topic, or you write your first essay and you take a look at it and you proofread it, you get some feedback, you say, maybe this isn't the right direction. That's fine. Right. Take a little breath, walk away from it a bit, come back with a new topic, start anew. Don't be afraid to start over, and give yourself the grace to know that you may not nail that topic right the first time. That's fine. Give yourself that time and start over.
Do proofread. Proofread early, proofread often, and proofread out loud. I think that's something that I use to this day, right? When I'm sending an email to my team, I'm reading it out loud over and over again to make sure that there aren't any mistakes, whether that's in grammar or in word choice, but also in just making sure my point is coming across, and making sure that my sentences are clear and concise. And so we recommend that students are continuing to edit, revise, and proofread their essays throughout their process. It's something that's going to be helpful to you. It's also helpful hearing your voice out loud, right? Going back to that term voice, right? That's something that we want to see come out in that essay. And so proofreading is going to help you every step of the way, the more and more you do it.
And in order to proofread, leave yourself plenty of time. So this is not an essay to procrastinate, to write the night before the application deadline. We can actually, when we read an essay, we can tell when it was written that at the last minute, at 11:30 at night, when the deadline is in half an hour. So leave yourself plenty of time. This is not a process to procrastinate. I think it is a great sign that all of you are here today learning more about the essay here on August 11th. You still have several months ahead of you to think about the essay, but I'd recommend starting as soon as you feel ready to start this process, and don't leave it to the last minute.
And last but not least, remember, we're on your side for this. We want this essay to reflect you and reflect your interest and share a bit of us with you. And so we really are on your side for this. And that includes feeling free to reach out and ask if you have questions along the way. Again, like Niki said, if you're not waiting to the last minute and you're not procrastinating, you've got time to inquire and ask questions if you have any about the application process where we can be helpful. And don't be afraid to use the resources that we have available out there as well. All right, so actually there they are right now. Niki just put them up on the screen. We've got two websites. One is our essay tips website, where we've compiled a list of tips for a good college essay. And the other one is a compilation of college essays that work. These are, I think there's about a dozen, maybe a couple fewer, of college essays that have worked, right? They have gained that student admission to Hamilton. They're all written by students who are either here on our campus right now or have recently graduated, and there are some great examples there. And I just got out of a meeting last week with some folks across campus, and we've named 8 new essays that will be up on these pages in the coming months as well, from students who will be starting with us this fall. So that's really exciting also. Thank you, Niki. All right, so Niki's going to talk a little bit now about some of the supplemental essays that go along with the college application process.
Yes, thank you, JD. So I've actually seen a number of questions that have been submitted today during this webinar in the Q&A about supplemental essays. So it seems like this is something that's on a lot of your minds right now. So thank you for all the questions that you've posed in the Q&A, and thank you to our colleague Caitlin, who's behind the scenes, who has been responding to these questions. But in terms of supplemental essays in general, so this is referring to a possible part of your application after, while you are submitting applications, whether you're using the common application, the Pressbridge application, or the coalition application, some colleges and universities will also have additional essays for students to write that are specifically written for those admission committees at those colleges and universities. It's good to start this process early as well. So I think that do and don't list that we just provided for you can also be applied to your approach to writing your supplemental essays. This is also something not to procrastinate, but they are not necessarily personal essays. So supplemental essays will all have different questions. There isn't really a common question that is specific, that is always a part of a supplemental essay. They are always specific to that institution where you are applying. So they're not necessarily personal essays. They may need a different approach. You may need to think carefully about what you write about in response to those supplemental essays. But again, spend as much time, care, and effort on these essays as you do on your personal essay, because if colleges and universities are going to require these supplemental essays, that means that they're really valuing them in their process. And your voice in these essays are also going to provide additional insight that that institution is going to value in their selection process as they're reviewing your application. Pay attention to the prompt, make sure that you are answering the question that is asked, and also make sure that you proofread all of those essays, supplemental essays. Make sure that if you're putting in the specific name of the institution where you're sending that essay to, that it is the correct college or university name, so that you have demonstrated that time and effort and care into carefully crafting that essay as a supplemental piece to your application. JD, do you have some final words, perhaps?
Yeah, but I do have to underscore what you just said is, I can't help but have to roll my eyes a little bit when I see a supplemental essay come to Hamilton where the student tells us just how great they would, how great of a time they would have at insert other college name here. Because, and trust me, it happens a couple of times every year. And, just like Niki said, take a look at those prompts, pay close attention to them, and answer the question that's asked for that particular institution. But we got a couple of questions in the chat here. Can we please post the links shown on the slideshow? Yeah, Niki, I think you can do that real quick.
Sure.
The links from just post them in the chat for folks here. Let's see if we got a couple other open questions. Have you released your short essay question yet? Oh, you mean the supplemental question. Yeah, I think that was a question I saw going a lot through the chat. So Hamilton has a few different ways for you to supplement your application. One of those is an optional essay, and that essay is not found as part of the application itself, right? So it's not out there on Common App or Coalition After Score or the QuestBridge application, but that supplement is actually in your applicant portal. So after you apply to Hamilton and we import your application, probably 2 or 3 days after you get that application, you're going to get an email from us. That email will have a login, a username, and a password for your applicant portal. And in your applicant portal, there is a number of ways for you to supplement your application, including that supplemental essay prompt. So you will find that in there. And let me see if we got another question here. If I have research publications, where can we include them? Niki, do you want to talk a little bit about where you see students putting when they've done outside research or independent papers with their applications?
Sure. So any additional information that you would like considered with your application, you are welcome to put either in the additional information section of your application, or you are also welcome to individually email this information directly to the admission offices where you are applying. Sometimes students are interested in having specific information added, for example, just to their Hamilton application or just to another specific college or university's application file. And so in that case, the email method would be really the best method to send that material to. And I think using the general admission email address is probably the best email address that you can use. And that is an email address that you can pretty easily find on colleges and universities' admission offices websites.
Yep. And I second Niki's advice there of sending it is better, because sometimes, depending on the application that you use, there's actually a word limit. So if you're trying to copy and paste information in or something that you've written in those additional information fields, sometimes those things can get cut off. Speaking of cutting off, somebody said, if the essay goes over the word limit, do we no longer consider it? Well, I wouldn't say that we would throw out, right, an application or an essay simply because you've gone over the word limit. And in some cases, some of the applications will allow you to do so, or some will actually hold you to that strict word limit. But we would hope that you would take a look at the requirements of the application and the expectations of the essay, and do your best to make sure that your essay fits within those parameters. Let's see. What other questions we have here? I have a question about, talking about your life before high school. I think that we had cautioned against trying too hard to tell your entire life story and fit it into an essay, because again, 650 words, not a lot. But I think that if there is a way for you to provide us with a backstory of information in a succinct manner that tells us what we need to know, that's fine. What we're trying to avoid is getting your life story up to the point of the actual event you want to tell us about. But if there's something about you, about your upbringing, about that makes you that you feel we need to understand to get the essay, to understand who you are, I think as long as you plan your essay out and you can find a way to fit it in there without making it the focus, that will work just fine. I don't know, Niki or Eric, if you have anything else to add on that. All right, well, we are fast running out of time here. I want to thank all of you for spending a bit of your evening with us to learn more about the college application process, and specifically the college essay writing portion of that. We have a number of virtual events coming up this fall. I'm actually going to put a link in the chat right now. If I can type and talk at the same time, not always possible. Okay, so go to hamilton.edu/visit and take a look specifically at the Virtually Hamilton section of the page that brings you to. We've got a number of Virtually Hamilton sessions like this throughout the fall that you can participate in, and I encourage you to do so. It's a great way for you to learn more about Hamilton, get your questions answered, and engage with folks like us, admission officers, and also we've got a number of students on upcoming panels as well. All right. Well, we thank you again for spending a bit of your day with us, and we look forward to reading your essays here as part of your applications in the coming weeks. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.